Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for stopping by University of Pattern Drafting. Today's tutorial is going to be on how to draft a basic sleeve block. But before I get into it, I want to thank my 12 subscribers. Like seriously, I have just 12 subscribers right now, for subscribing and supporting this channel. I am so grateful. And if you are watching and you haven't subscribed yet, like seriously, what are you waiting for? Please be nice and subscribe and help us grow this family so that we can put out more great content for you guys. Thank you so very much. So on to our tutorial on how to draft a basic sleeve block. Here are the materials that we're going to be needing. And here are the measurements that we're going to be needing. So let's get right on to the tutorial. So the first step is to fold the pattern paper into two so I can mark my grain line at the center of the pattern paper. So after folding it, I'll draw a vertical line from the top to the bottom of the pattern paper. And the next step will be to label front and back on both sides of the grain line so I can distinguish the front from the back. So the next step will be to impute a 0.5 seam allowance at the top of my pattern paper. So that means I'm marking a line 0.5 inches away from the top of my pattern paper. That's going to be just for my seam allowance. And I'm just squaring out the line. So the next step will be to impute my sleeve length measurements, which are from the tip of my shoulder to my elbow, and then from the tip of my shoulder to my wrist measurements. So the next thing I'll do now is to work on my cap height. So the cap height is the distance between the shoulder tip and the underarm line. Please note that the underarm line is about 1.5 centimeters below the armpit. So I'm going to be marking that. And to derive the cap height, I use some certain standard measurements for certain sizes. So please refer to the image at the beginning showing the measurements needed. This would give you a detailed table on cap heights for various UK sizes. So here my client's size is a size 14, so I'll be using 5 3/4 inches. So I'm marking that on the vertical line of my, I'm marking that on my grain line. So the next step now is to mark my sleeve width measurements. So to mark my sleeve width, my client's sleeve width is 15 inches. 15 inches divided by 2 is 7.5. So I'm marking 7.5 inches on both sides of the grain line. And then I'm marking my elbow width measurements as well as my wrist measurements. So this is a very simple and easy to understand tutorial, so just concentrate and you will get the gist of the matter. So now I'm squaring out my cap height line. And then the next step now will be, I'll proceed to draw out my sleeve curve. So to do that, I'm drawing using a diagonal line to connect the tip of the top of my grain line to both measurements of my biceps, around my biceps measurements. So having done that, I'm going to work on the front pattern first. The front portion first. To work on that front portion, so I'm working on the front portion of my sleeve cap height. So first off, I'll measure that diagonal line. The diagonal line is 9.5 inches. So I'll proceed to divide that 9.5 by 4. To do that, I'm going to fold my 9.5 inches of my tape rule into 4 parts. Can you see what I'm doing here? So I'm trying to fold it and create indentations along those portions so that I can easily know where the points are. So I've created an indentation by pressing it slightly, and I'm going to transfer the measurements onto my diagonal line. So now I've divided that diagonal line into 4 panels. So I'm going to be working on the first panel. So I'm going to be working on my first panel, as I said earlier. So I'll start by marking 0.5 inches above the marking of my first panel, as you can see. So where I'm pointing at, I'm going to mark 0.5 inches above that point, above the diagonal line at that point. And then I'll move to the marking of my last panel. I'll move to my third panel and divide my third panel into 2. So please move to the third panel and divide that third panel into 2 and just mark the point. So next off, I'll move to my last panel. Yes, the marking of my last panel, and mark 0.5 inches below the diagonal line at that point. And then I'll proceed to use my French curve to connect those points. So that's basically what I did. So in doing that, one of the things to note is that when creating that curve, make sure that the top, at that top that I'm touching, is kind of slightly flat. Don't just do a sharp curve and just bring it down immediately. No, just try to do like maybe a 1 inch straight line before you now start to curve down. So that's basically what it is. You can see this is pretty simple, so just pay close attention. So the next step now is we're going to work on the back panel. So to work on the back panel, you measure the diagonal line of that back panel and divide it into 3 parts. So my diagonal line, as you can see, is 9.5 inches. So I'm going to be dividing that into 3. Please watch how I'm folding 9.5 inches of the tape rule to derive my points, because that's pretty much the easiest way to do it instead of having to use a calculator. So I'm pressing it to create indentations at those points so it will be easy to transfer the measurements to my diagonal line. So can you see? Press it slightly just to create indentations at that point so it's easier to transfer it to the diagonal line. Excuse me. So after dividing that diagonal line into 3, I'll now divide my last panel into 2 and mark the point. And then move to the marking for my first panel and mark 3/8 inches above the diagonal line at that point. And then I'll move to that half point of my last panel and measure and mark 3/8 inches below the diagonal line at that point. Can you see that? Then I would proceed to dividing my second panel into 2, and then I'll use a curve to connect all of those points. So pretty easy. So here I'm trying to use my other curved ruler to figure out how to trace out this curve, since my pattern master is not currently here. So I'm tracing out the curve So essentially, remember 3/8 inches above the marking of the first panel, divide the second panel into two and mark the point. So yes, and divide the third panel into two and mark the point. Measure 3/8 inches below the diagonal line at the last panel and then connect the points. So the next step now is to impute my sleeve width measurement. So I'm imputing my elbow width measurement as well as my wrist measurements. And then I'm just going to draw out the lines with my ruler. So this is basically how to draft your basic sleeve block. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. If you've enjoyed, please be nice enough to like, comment, share and subscribe to this channel. So the next step now would be to impute my allowances. My allowance is 0.5 inches, and so I'm just going to be imputing 0.5 inches allowance all round, including at the top tip of the sleeve, the top of the sleeve. So this is basically all about drafting the basic sleeve block. I trust you found this helpful, so please comment, like, share and subscribe, and I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for stopping.